Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Trump says to suspend third world migration after death toll of a National Guard in shooting outside the White House. DHS points to U.S. travel ban list when asked about third world countries. UN Refugee Agency says overwhelming majority of refugees are law-abiding members of host community, says people must have a due process of asylum and access to territory UN Rights Office. US President Donald Trump also says that efforts to halt Venezuelan drug trafficking by land would begin very soon, further ratcheting up tension with Caracas, which claims the anti-drug campaign aims at regime change. Trump announces that the National Guard trooper Sarah Beckstrom had died after a shooting near the White House. He said the second soldier remains in critical condition. Zelensky says Kyiv holds daily consultation with international partners to counter Russia's war, adds Ukrainian and US delegation will meet again to advance frameworks for peace and security guarantees. Meanwhile, President Vladimir Putin says the US plan could be basis of a Ukraine deal but threatens to take land by force if Kyiv withdraws. Hong Kong authorities report that 128 are now dead with 79 injured, including 12 firefighters, one seriously in a high-rise apartment complex fire in Tai Po. Rescue efforts are complete, but around 200 residents remain unaccounted for. Sri Lanka deploys troops as waters from floods rise. Death toll hits 56 with another 21 people missing. Sri Lanka is currently experiencing the northeast monsoon season, but rainfall has intensified due to a cyclone. And viewers, the top focus story on America 360. US President Donald Trump announcing that his administration will permanently pause migration from all third world countries. Now, this is following an ambush-style shooting near the White House that killed National Guard member Sarah Beckstrom and critically wounded another soldier. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has pointed to the 19 nations already under a Trump-era travel ban when asked about which countries the new pause would cover. The suspected gunman, who is a 29-year-old Afghan national Rahmanullah Lankanwal, is a former member of the CIA-backed Zero units. He has been granted asylum in April 2025 under the Trump administration. Officials have said that he drove from Washington state to the Capitol before opening fire with a .357 revolver. He faces assault with intent to kill charges, which will be upgraded to first-degree murder if the second soldier dies. Trump used the attack to defend his deployment of National Guard troops to major cities and ordered a review of green cards issued to nationals from the 19 concerned countries. Afghan evacuation resettlement groups stressed that Afghan evacuees underwent extensive vetting and urged against broad stigmatization. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered 500 additional troops to Washington, raising the total to 2,500. And David K. Johnston, who's an American author, now joins us live from New York. Thank you, David, for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, of course, the crackdown that Trump is imposing on these residents and citizens of the countries of concern is being met with severe criticism. How do you think the Trump administration is going to respond? Is there going to be further crackdown, or is it going to concede to some degree?
I think you're going to see more troops on the streets in the United States, which violates an American law called the Posse Comitatus Act. American soldiers, except in the most extraordinary circumstances, namely an invasion of the country, are not supposed to be deployed against American citizens. But Trump has long talked of doing this, and he's done it in several major cities, and I expect you will see more of this. By the way, most of the troops in Washington, D.C. have nothing to do because crime is so low in the nation's capital, has been falling for years, except when it rose during the first Trump administration. So we see these National Guard soldiers, these are part-time soldiers, doing things like picking up litter and spreading mulch in parks.
All right, and how should you respond to the accusations that are coming from these, in fact, also the United Nations, not just the countries of concern, the 19 countries that have been listed?
Well, Trump is very anti-immigrant, which is a little bizarre because his mother was an immigrant and 2 of his 3 wives were immigrants.
Interesting.
But Trump has been looking for a way at the direction of his deputy White House chief of staff, Stephen Miller, who at the DC Report News Service we call Trump's Minister of Hate, to remove people. And Trump's comments suggest that he intends to go after naturalized American citizens and take away their citizenship. The administration has also argued that it has a right to remove American citizens it doesn't like from the United States. And this is a very troublesome and unconstitutional conduct, but it will matter how the court, particularly the U.S. Supreme Court, weighs in on this. I think any trial court will stand in the way of Trump's efforts, but the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly found ways to allow Trump to take these extra constitutional and extra legal actions.
All right, do stay on with us, David. Let's also tell our viewers what the United Nations has to say on this. Now, the UN has pushed back against Trump's latest remarks on migration, and it has stressed that people seeking refugees, camps and asylums are entitled to protection under international law. The UN Refugee Agency has said that overwhelming majority of refugees are law-abiding members of their host communities and emphasized that all asylum seekers must be given due process and access to territory regardless of political circumstances. The UN Human Rights Office echoed that view, reminding governments that individuals fleeing conflict or persecution have a legal right to seek safety and should not be collectively penalized. Let's bring back David into the conversation here. David, do you think the UN's remark is going to have any effect on Trump? In fact, I also want to ask you whether this move of Trump is going to, better his credit ratings.
Well, the UN is exactly right about the law, both international law and American law. But Trump is not constrained by law. I mean, understand that he is the 3rd generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family. We have a number of white-collar crime families. One of the things I teach my criminal justice students at Rochester Institute of Technology is about white-collar crime families in America. They don't kill people or break their legs. They steal with contracts and getting government officials to take their side in disputes. Domestically, his efforts to remove people have proven incredibly unpopular, and we will get a test of that next week. There is a special election to replace a member of Congress in Tennessee in a district that Trump won by 22 percentage points. And the Republican running in that race may lose, but anything less than the 22 points Trump got would be a signal of the increasing revulsion of many Americans to Trump's efforts to remove people from the country, many of whom are law-abiding, have permission to be here, and in more than 100 cases were U.S. citizens whom the government absolutely has no right to remove from the country.
Well, absolutely. To stay on with us, David, viewers, let's also tell you that Trump has also said that the U.S. will very soon begin actions to stop suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers operating on land. Now, Trump stated that while drug traffickers have shifted to sea routes, the U.S. military will now target drug operations on land, which he called easier to interdict. Now, the U.S. has already carried out multiple strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. The US government has accused Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro of involvement in the drug trade, although Maduro denies these allegations. And let's bring back David into the discussion here. David, what is the collateral damage here when US deploys its boats in the Caribbean? There's allegations of loss of lives and prevention of drug smuggling and trafficking into the US, but how can this collateral damage in terms of the loss of human life be prevented?
Well, Kriti, the first thing to know is that the Trump administration's own drug enforcement agency says that there are no smuggling of fentanyl into the United States from Venezuela. None, zero. And yet Trump keeps alleging that that's happening. And only a tiny portion of other illegal drugs entering the U.S. come from Venezuela. In fact, according to Trump's administration, less than 1% of the drugs smuggled into the U.S. come via Venezuela. So this is a made-up excuse to go after a government that Trump doesn't like and the people around him don't like. What this runs the risk of is several things. First of all, we've repeatedly blocked a Russian ship carrying naphtha. Venezuela has the most oil in the world in the ground, but it is so thick you have to thin it with naphtha in order to refine it. And the U.S. military has interdicted this Russian ship repeatedly.
Yeah.
It is risking being separated from the rest of the world and becoming basically a pariah state if we continue down this path.
All right. Well, I thank you, David, for joining us here at NewsX World and sharing your opinion with us. And viewers, let's now shift our focus. Now, dozens of Panamanians have gathered outside the foreign ministry in the Panama City to protest what organizers described as growing U.S. military involvement in the country. The demonstration, organized by the Broad Front for Democracy, included the delivery of a letter calling on the government to reject any U.S. intervention and to disclose the number of U.S. troops and types of weapons currently in Panama. Protesters carried banners and waved national flags, citing concerns over U.S. military pressure on Venezuela. The group also urged authorities to oppose potential U.S. military bases and to withdraw from security cooperation agreements they consider a threat to national sovereignty. Let's listen in.
Al Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y al gobierno como tal, que dé un informe detallado a la nación qué cantidad de tropas norteamericanas están acantonadas en la República de Panamá, qué cantidad de armamento y qué armamento están utilizados, porque la gente ha sido testigo, han habido videos y fotografías de tanquetas, han buscado tanquetas, aviación y otro tipo de artillerías, de infantería que están dentro de nuestro territorio y nosotros comprendemos. Definitivamente nosotros somos un pueblo de paz, que totalmente prueba un gobierno dócil, un gobierno sumiso, un gobierno vendepatria y una política imperialista que no se detiene y que solamente sueña con el dominio del mundo a pesar de la sangre que tenga que derramar.
Raymond Vickery, who's an international affairs expert, now joins us into this discussion. Thank you, Vickery, Mr. Vickery, for joining us here at NewsX World. Do you think the demonstration is going to have any effect on Trump's policies?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I don't think they'll have any effect on Trump. Trump has a throwback view of empire. His view is that great nations are entitled to have empires in their sphere of influence. And that's his Latin American policy. This is a throwback to really the 19th century, which we got away from in the 20th century. Namely in Panama by returning the canal to the sovereignty of Panama. And you will recall that early on in Trump's administration, he indicated he might take Panama back by force. He talked about taking Greenland. He talked about Canada being the 51st state. So I think he's impervious to this kind of demonstration. But I do think it's very, very important for the United States going forward because it demonstrates that people are not going to go back to the 19th century. They're not going to go back to spheres of influence, and that they're going to demand that the fundamentals of the United Nations Charter, namely non-interference with the sovereignty of other nations, be respected. So it's significant, but having an impact on President Trump is not likely. He has a transactional view. He was looking for a transaction in which he can come out and say that he's the winner. This is completely contrary to what you need to be able to do to wage peace and prosperity, which is namely have a strategy and have partners. So it's a distressing development, but one that should have been foreseen. And I predict that if Trump keeps it up in terms of destroying fishing boats and threatening invasion, that you'll see more of this kind of demonstration.
And is this demonstration going to move the government of Panama? There's strikes and demonstrations being held throughout the year against the government itself and its handling of several issues concerning its citizens.
I think it will have more an impact domestically in terms of Panama. Panama has already pushed back against the idea of turning the canal back over to the United States. They're trying to walk a very fine line here, but they have to listen to what is happening domestically. And as I said, I think that this is going to be a forerunner of what you're going to see if Trump continues this policy of reversion to empire in the Western Hemisphere.
All right, do stay on with us, Mr. Vickery, as I will seek your opinion on another story going forward. For now, viewers, let's also tell you that President Putin has said that a new U.S. proposal to end the war in Ukraine could potentially form the basis for future agreements, but he paired that comment with renewed threats to seize more Ukrainian territory by force. Speaking in Kyrgyzstan earlier today, Putin confirmed that a U.S. delegation led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will visit Moscow early next week for what he called serious discussions. Despite that, a breakthrough appears unlikely. Putin repeated that the war will only end once Ukraine withdraws from all the territories Russia claims, areas that Moscow has annexed but does not fully control. He warned that if Kyiv refuses, Russia will try to take the land militarily. Ukrainian President Zelensky said his team will also meet U.S. officials next week with more high-stakes talks planned. Kyiv and its European partners continue to insist that territorial concessions are a red line. Now, Russia currently occupies about 20% of internationally recognized Ukrainian land, and although it has made limited gains in the East, conflict analysts say a full Russian victory is far from inevitable. Putin's comments suggest Moscow is hardening its demands, even as U.S. officials promote what they describe as tremendous progress in peace efforts. I want to bring back Mr. Vickery into the discussions here. Are you also of the opinion, Mr. Vickery, that Putin is hard-pressed and his demands are rather maximalists, especially with this latest comment coming in that he's going to annex Russian territory if Ukraine is not withdrawing completely?
Well, thanks for letting me comment on this. To some extent, President Putin's approach is the mirror image of that of President Trump. And that is, he believes in empire, he believes in spheres of influence. He has said in the past that the world's worst geopolitical catastrophe was the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was really nothing but the old Russian Empire. So what he would like to do is to get back territory. And he had put forward to the United States in the 28-point plan that he would get territory which he didn't even occupy at this point. That crossed a red line, and my understanding is that under the pressure from Europe and kickback from Ukraine, that position has been receded from. And the other point that Putin wanted was to neuter the military in Ukraine so that they would not be able to resist further incursions at a later time. And that has not happened as well. This having been said, it is true that on both sides, the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, there are weakening positions. One of the points that is noted by Moscow, it seems to me, is the willingness of reliance in India to go along with the sanctions which have been put on Rosneft and Lukoil. So there is a weakening of the Russian position in regard to its economic situation. On the Ukrainian side, there has been a scandal in terms of kickbacks in the defense and energy areas. So both sides are somewhat weakened, and it is to be hoped that this will be able to lead to at least some sort of ceasefire along battle lines which we have now. But again, what's required to wage peace, just like waging war, is you have to have a strategy and you have to have partners. Unfortunately, the Trump approach is one of a real estate transaction in which presumably he comes out on top. So yes, there are some glimmers here and hopes that the killing will stop. But as far as an overall peace arrangement which will stand the test of time, we're still a long way from that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vickery, for your detailed response on this. And viewers, let's now move on. Mexico's Attorney General Alejandro Gertz has resigned after President Claudia Sheinbaum offered him an ambassadorship. Gertz confirmed his resignation in a letter read in the Senate, where he explained that Sheinbaum proposed the ambassadorship in a friendly country, allowing him to continue public service. The resignation follows tension between Gertz's office and the president, especially after Sheinbaum publicly criticized the need for better coordination between federal and state prosecutors to combat crime. Now, Gertz, who was appointed in 2019 as Mexico's first independent attorney general, has faced growing scrutiny, including leaks related to sensitive criminal investigations. The Senate approved his resignation, and now Sheinbaum must propose 3 candidates for his replacement. The Senate will select a new attorney general through a 2/3 majority vote. Moving on now to news from Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney signed an agreement on the 27th with Alberta to advance a new oil pipeline aimed at boosting oil exports to Asia. The deal has sparked outcry over climate concerns, with environmental groups arguing the project could undermine Canada's emission targets. Carney defended the project, saying it included carbon capture technology to mitigate impacts. The deal also led to the resignation of former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, who called it a setback in the fight against climate change. A formal proposal is expected now by 2026. And thank you for watching America 360 on NewsX World. Do stay tuned for more international news updates from around the world.